The golden gates of Buckingham Palace had witnessed centuries of royal drama, but nothing could have prepared the world for what was about to unfold on that gray November morning. Behind those towering walls, where power and privilege had reigned supreme for generations, a family was about to be torn apart in the most public and devastating way imaginable. Queen Camilla, once the woman who had waited decades to wear the crown, now found herself facing the unthinkable. The very institution she had fought so hard to be part of was turning against her, and the family she had protected was about to be ripped from her arms by the same hands that had once placed a tiara upon her head. What started as whispers in the corridors of power had become a roar that would shake the monarchy to its core. Ancient laws, modern scandals, and family secrets were colliding in a perfect storm that would either destroy the royal family forever or forge them into something entirely new. This is the story of how a queen became a mother first, and how sometimes the greatest act of royalty is knowing when to let everything go. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine lawns of Windsor Castle as Queen Camilla stood at the window of her private chambers, watching her grandchildren play in the garden below. 8-year-old Princess Charlotte was chasing her younger brother Prince Louis around the ancient oak tree, their laughter echoing off the stone walls that had stood for nearly 1,000 years. For a moment, everything seemed perfect in her world. But Camilla knew better than most that perfection in the royal family was often just an illusion, carefully crafted for the cameras and the public. The phone call she had received an hour earlier from the Prime Minister's office still rang in her ears. 3 simple words that had changed everything. "We need to talk." She turned away from the window as her lady-in-waiting, Margaret, entered the room with her usual morning tea service. The elderly woman had been with the royal family for over 30 years and had served 3 queens before Camilla. Her face, usually composed and cheerful, carried an expression of deep concern that made Camilla's stomach tighten with dread. "Your Majesty," Margaret began carefully, setting the delicate china cup and saucer on the mahogany side table. "There are several gentlemen here to see you. They're waiting in the blue drawing room." Camilla nodded slowly, her fingers unconsciously twisting the simple gold band on her ring finger. It wasn't her wedding ring or any of the elaborate royal jewelry she was expected to wear. It was a small, worn band that had belonged to her mother, the only thing she had left from her life before all of this began. Before she became a queen, before she became a stepmother to William and Harry, before she became the woman the whole world either loved or hated. The walk to the blue drawing room felt longer than usual. Each step on the Persian carpet seemed to echo through the empty corridors, and Camilla found herself remembering the first time she had walked these halls as Charles's wife. She had been nervous then, too, but it was a different kind of nervousness. Back then, she had been worried about fitting in, about being accepted by the family and the public. Now, she was walking towards something that might destroy everything she had built. The blue drawing room had always been one of her favorite spaces in the castle. The walls were covered in silk damask the color of a summer sky, and the furniture had been carefully chosen to create an atmosphere of elegant comfort. But today, the room felt cold and unwelcoming. 4 men in dark suits stood as she entered, their faces grave and professional. She recognized the Prime Minister immediately. James Morrison was a tall, thin man with prematurely gray hair and the kind of intense eyes that made people uncomfortable. Beside him stood Sir Edmund Hartley, the cabinet secretary, whose job it was to keep the government running smoothly behind the scenes. The other 2 men were strangers to her, but their bearing suggested they were from some branch of law enforcement or intelligence. "Your Majesty," the Prime Minister said, offering a slight bow. "Thank you for seeing us on such short notice." Camilla took her seat in the ornate chair that had been placed at the head of the small seating area. It was a deliberate choice, she knew. Even in this moment, protocol demanded that she maintain her position as sovereign. "Prime Minister," she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. "I assume this isn't a social visit." Morrison exchanged glances with the other men before taking his own seat. "I'm afraid not, Your Majesty. We've received some very serious allegations that require immediate attention." The word allegations hit Camilla like a physical blow. In her 20 years as part of the royal family, she had faced her share of scandals and controversies. The press had dissected every aspect of her life, from her relationship with Charles during his marriage to Diana to her role as stepmother to his sons. But this felt different. This felt final. "What kind of allegations?" she asked, proud that her voice remained steady. Sir Edmund cleared his throat and opened the leather portfolio he had been carrying. There have been accusations of financial impropriety, Your Majesty. Specifically, the misuse of funds from the Duchy of Cornwall and several royal charities. Camilla's mind raced. The Duchy of Cornwall was Charles's private estate, worth hundreds of millions of pounds. As queen, she had access to those funds for her official duties and charitable work. She thought of every check she had signed, every donation she had approved. Had there been mistakes? Had someone in her office made errors that could be interpreted as fraud? I don't understand, she said carefully. Every expenditure from the duchy goes through multiple levels of approval. We have accountants, lawyers, and oversight committees. The Prime Minister nodded. We understand that, Your Majesty. But the accusations suggest that these safeguards were deliberately bypassed. There are allegations that money intended for military charities was diverted to personal accounts, and that funds meant for children's hospitals were used for private family expenses. The accusations were absurd, but Camilla could see the political calculation behind them. The royal family's finances had always been a source of public debate. In times of economic hardship, people questioned why the monarchy needed so much money while ordinary citizens struggled to pay their bills. If someone could make it appear that the royals were stealing from charities, it would be devastating to their public image. Who is making these accusations? She asked. One of the unknown men spoke for the first time. His voice was crisp and official, the kind that came from years of testifying in court. I'm Detective Chief Inspector Williams from the Serious Fraud Office. The allegations have come from multiple sources, including former employees of the royal household and financial institutions. We've been conducting a preliminary investigation for several weeks. Camilla felt a chill run down her spine. They had been investigating her for weeks without her knowledge, building a case while she went about her daily duties of ribbon cuttings and state dinners. She thought of the charity event she had attended just 3 days ago, where she had presented a check for £50,000 to a children's hospital. Had the cameras captured her smiling face while investigators were already preparing to arrest her? I want to be very clear, she said, looking each man in the eye. I have never, ever misused funds from the duchy or any royal charity. Every pound that passes through my office is accounted for and properly documented. We understand your position, Your Majesty, the Prime Minister said. But the evidence that's been presented is quite compelling. Bank records, emails, witness statements. The investigators believe they have enough to proceed with formal charges. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the ornate clock on the mantelpiece. Camilla could hear her own heartbeat in her ears as the full implications of what they were telling her began to sink in. Formal charges meant a trial. A trial meant months of headlines, testimony, and evidence presented in open court. It meant the monarchy dragged through the mud in the most public way possible. What are you asking me to do? She said quietly. Sir Edmund leaned forward in his chair. The government believes that the best course of action for both the monarchy and the country would be for you to step aside while this matter is resolved. Temporarily, of course, until the investigation is complete. Step aside. Such gentle words for such a devastating concept. They wanted her to abdicate, to give up the crown that she had waited decades to wear. They wanted her to admit guilt without a trial, to sacrifice herself for the good of the institution. And if I refuse? The Prime Minister's expression grew even more serious. Then, we would have no choice but to proceed with the arrest and formal charges. The investigation has also raised questions about other members of your family. Your children from your previous marriage have been mentioned in some of the financial records. Camilla's blood ran cold. Tom and Laura had nothing to do with royal finances. They lived their own lives, ran their own businesses, and stayed as far away from the public eye as possible. But she knew how these things worked. Once an investigation began, it spread like wildfire, consuming everyone in its path. You're threatening my children. We're explaining the reality of the situation, the Prime Minister replied. If this goes to trial, everyone connected to the alleged financial improprieties will be subject to investigation. That could include your children, your stepchildren, even your grandchildren's trust funds. The mention of the grandchildren made Camilla's hands clench into fists in her lap. She thought of Charlotte and Louis playing in the garden, innocent and happy, unaware that their grandmother was sitting in a room where men in suits were discussing how to destroy their family. How long do I have to decide? We need an answer today, Your Majesty, Detective Chief Inspector Williams said. The story is going to break in tomorrow morning's newspapers regardless of your decision. We wanted to give you the opportunity to get ahead of it. Of course they did. They wanted her to make their job easy, to voluntarily step down so they could avoid the messy business of arresting a sitting monarch. It would be cleaner for everyone if she simply disappeared quietly, leaving them free to spin the story however they wanted. Camilla stood up, and all four men immediately rose to their feet out of respect for her position. The irony wasn't lost on her that they were showing deference to the crown even as they worked to destroy it. "I need to speak with my family," she said. "I'll give you my answer by 6 o'clock this evening." The Prime Minister nodded. "Of course, Your Majesty. We'll be waiting for your call." As the men filed out of the blue drawing room, Camilla remained standing by the window, looking out at the gardens where her grandchildren continued to play. In a few hours, their world would be turned upside down. Their grandmother would either be a disgraced former queen or an accused criminal awaiting trial. Either way, their childhoods would never be the same. She thought about calling Charles, but he was on a state visit to Australia and wouldn't be back for 3 days. She could reach him by phone, but what could he do from 12,000 miles away? Besides, if the allegations were true about financial impropriety involving the Duchy of Cornwall, he might be implicated as well. The door opened behind her, and she turned to see William entering the room. Her stepson looked older than his 41 years, the weight of his future crown already showing in the lines around his eyes. He had obviously been told about the meeting, because his face carried the same grave expression as the men who had just left. "They told you," Camilla said. It wasn't a question. William nodded, closing the door behind him. "Catherine is with the children. We've told them you're having important meetings today, but they don't know anything else. What do you think I should do?" William was quiet for a long moment, his hands clasped behind his back in the same gesture his father often used when he was thinking. "I think you should fight," he said finally. "If you're innocent, and I believe you are, then you should fight these allegations with everything you have, even if it destroys the monarchy. The monarchy has survived worse than this. It survived the abdication crisis, World War II, Diana's death, Harry's departure. It will survive this too, but only if we face it with integrity." Camilla smiled sadly at her stepson. "You sound like your father. I learned from the best." But even as William spoke words of support, Camilla could see the worry in his eyes. He was thinking about his own children, about the legacy he would inherit, about the damage that a prolonged scandal could do to the institution they had all sworn to protect. He was thinking like a future king, weighing the good of the monarchy against the good of any individual member. "There's something else," William continued. "I've been in contact with our legal team. If these allegations are false, and we believe they are, then someone has gone to extraordinary lengths to fabricate evidence. This isn't just about money. This is about destroying the monarchy itself." The thought had occurred to Camilla as well. The timing was suspicious, coming just months after the successful coronation and during a period of relative stability for the royal family. The allegations were also perfectly crafted to hit the monarchy's most vulnerable points: money, privilege, and the perception that the royals were out of touch with ordinary people. Who would want to do that? William shook his head. It could be anyone. Republican politicians who want to abolish the monarchy, foreign governments looking to destabilize Britain, even someone with a personal grudge. What matters is that we don't let them win. A soft knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Margaret entered again, this time carrying a silver tray with a telephone. "Your Majesty," she said quietly. "The Archbishop of Canterbury is on the line." Camilla looked at the phone as if it might bite her. The Archbishop was the head of the Church of England, the institution that had crowned her just months earlier. His call could only mean that the allegations had already spread beyond the government. "Put him through to my private study," she told Margaret. "And please ask Catherine to bring the children inside. I think their playtime is over for today." As she walked toward her study to take the call that would determine her fate, Camilla passed a portrait of Queen Elizabeth II that hung in the corridor. The late Queen's painted eyes seemed to follow her, and she could almost hear her voice offering the advice she had given so many times. The crown must endure, whatever the cost to those who wear it. But what happened when the cost became too high? What happened when protecting the crown meant sacrificing the family it was supposed to serve? These were questions that no amount of royal protocol could answer, and as Camilla picked up the phone to speak with the Archbishop, she knew that the next few hours would determine not just her own fate, but the future of the monarchy itself. Outside her window, the November sky was growing darker, and the first drops of rain began to fall on the ancient stones of Windsor Castle. Inside, a queen was about to make the most difficult decision of her life, knowing that whatever she chose, nothing would ever be the same again. The Archbishop's voice crackled through the secure telephone line, each word carefully measured and heavy with implications. Justin Welby had been a friend to the royal family for years, but today he spoke with the formal distance that came with his role as the spiritual leader of the nation. Your Majesty, I'm calling because I felt you should hear this directly from me rather than through official channels, he began. The Church has received a formal request from Parliament to review your coronation oath in light of these allegations. Camilla sank into her leather chair, the same one where she had signed hundreds of official documents as queen. The coronation oath was sacred, a promise made before God and the nation to serve with integrity and honor. To have it questioned was tantamount to declaring her unfit to rule. Archbishop, surely you don't believe these accusations? My personal beliefs are not what matters here, he replied carefully. What matters is the faith of the people in the institution of the monarchy. If that faith is shaken, then we all have a responsibility to address it. It was a politician's answer, wrapped in religious language. The Archbishop was protecting the Church, just as the Prime Minister was protecting the government. Everyone was looking out for their own institutions, and Camilla was beginning to realize that she was standing alone. After ending the call, she sat in silence for several minutes, staring at the family photographs that lined her desk. There was one of Charles on their wedding day, both of them older than most newlyweds, but radiant with happiness. Another showed her with William and Harry at a charity polo match, all three of them laughing at some joke she could no longer remember. The most recent addition was a picture of her with all the grandchildren at Christmas, their faces bright with excitement as they opened presents. These people were her family now, had been for 20 years. She had weathered every storm with them, from the initial hostility of the press to the tragedy of Harry's departure from royal duties. She had earned her place among them through love, loyalty, and years of dedicated service. But now, when she needed them most, the very institution they all served was turning against her. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Catherine entered without waiting for permission, something she rarely did. The Duchess of Cambridge looked tired and worried, her usually perfect composure showing cracks around the edges. The children are asking questions, Catherine said, closing the door behind her. Charlotte wanted to know why there are strange cars in the driveway, and why the guards look so serious. I told them you were having important meetings, but she's too smart to believe that for long. Camilla nodded, understanding the impossible position Catherine was in. As a mother, her first instinct was to protect her children from anything that might hurt them. But, as a member of the royal family, she also knew that hiding the truth would only make things worse when it inevitably came out. What have you told William? Everything I know, which isn't much. Catherine sat down in the chair across from Camilla's desk. He's trying to reach your legal team, but most of them are saying they need to review the evidence before they can advise you. No one wants to commit to defending someone who might be guilty. The pragmatism of lawyers. Camilla had expected as much, but it still stung. These were people who had worked with her for years, who had helped her navigate the complex legal requirements of royal life. Now they were treating her like any other potential criminal, weighing the evidence and the risks before deciding whether she was worth defending. Catherine, I need you to know something, Camilla said, leaning forward across the desk. These allegations are completely false. I have never stolen money from any charity or misused duchy funds. I would never do anything to hurt this family or betray the trust that's been placed in me. Catherine's expression softened, and for a moment she looked less like a duchess and more like the young woman who had captured William's heart at university. I believe you, she said simply. But belief isn't enough anymore, is it? Before Camilla could answer, the door burst open and Prince Louis came running in, followed closely by his older sister Charlotte. At 6 years old, Louis still had the complete fearlessness that comes with childhood, and he launched himself into Camilla's arms without any regard for royal protocol. Granny Camilla, he shouted, wrapping his small arms around her neck. Mummy said you were in important meetings, but I missed you. Charlotte, at 8, was more observant and cautious. She stayed near the door, her dark eyes taking in the serious expressions on the adults' faces. Are you in trouble, Granny? She asked quietly. The question hit Camilla like a physical blow. How did you explain to a child that sometimes adults got accused of things they didn't do? How did you tell them that the world they thought was safe and predictable could change overnight? Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, she said carefully, still holding Louis while trying to find words that would be honest but not frightening. Some people think I made mistakes with money that belongs to the royal family. But you wouldn't steal money, Charlotte said with the absolute certainty that only children possess. You're the queen. Queens don't steal. If only it were that simple. If only being queen provided some magical protection against false accusations and political maneuvering. But Charlotte's innocent faith in her grandmother's goodness reminded Camilla of what was really at stake. It wasn't just about her reputation or even the monarchy as an institution. It was about these children and the world they would inherit. Catherine gently guided the children toward the door. Why don't you go find George? I think he's in the library with his tutor. After they left, the room felt even quieter than before. Camilla could hear the rain that had started earlier now beating steadily against the windows. November in England was always gray and depressing, but today it felt particularly ominous. I've made my decision, Camilla said suddenly. Catherine turned back from the door where she had been watching her children disappear down the corridor. What will you do? I'm going to fight. William was right earlier. If I'm innocent, and I am, then I need to prove it. I can't let whoever is behind this destroy our family without a fight. Catherine nodded, but Camilla could see the worry in her eyes. A fight meant months of headlines, investigations, and public scrutiny. It meant every aspect of their lives would be examined and questioned. It meant the children would grow up under a cloud of suspicion and scandal. What do you need from us? The question was simple, but it carried enormous weight. Catherine was asking not just as William's wife, but as the future queen consort. She was offering to stand by Camilla even when it might be politically expedient to distance themselves from her. I need you to trust me, Camilla said. And I need you to protect the children from as much of this as possible. They don't deserve to have their childhoods destroyed because of lies about their grandmother. Of course. But, Camilla, what if the evidence is convincing? What if people believe these allegations, even if they're false? It was the question Camilla had been trying not to think about. Public opinion was fickle, and the British press had never been particularly kind to the royal family. If the evidence looked bad enough, it wouldn't matter whether she was actually guilty. The damage to the monarchy could be irreversible. Then, we'll deal with that when it happens. But I won't go down without a fight. The secure phone on her desk rang again, and Camilla could see from the caller ID that it was Charles calling from Australia. She had been dreading this conversation, but it was inevitable. He needed to know what was happening to his wife and his kingdom. I have to take this, she told Catherine, who nodded and quietly left the room. Darling. Charles's voice came through clearly despite the distance. I've been getting calls from Downing Street. What on earth is going on? Camilla took a deep breath and told him everything. About the allegations, the meeting with the Prime Minister, the demand that she step aside. She could hear him getting angrier as she spoke, his voice rising in a way that reminded her of his younger days when he was quicker to lose his temper. This is absolutely outrageous, he said when she finished. I know every expenditure from the duchy, and there has never been any impropriety. Someone is orchestrating this, and when I find out who, there will be consequences. Charles, you need to be careful. If these allegations are false, then whoever created them is very sophisticated. They might have evidence that implicates you as well. There was silence on the line for a moment. Are you saying I should abandon you to protect myself? I'm saying you need to think about what's best for the monarchy. If we both go down, who will protect William and the children? It was a conversation they had never imagined having. For 20 years, they had been partners in everything, supporting each other through scandals and celebrations alike. Now they were talking about the possibility that one of them might have to sacrifice themselves to save the other. I'm coming home, Charles said finally. I'll leave tonight. No, you should finish the state visit. If you come rushing back, it will look like panic. It will make everything worse. I'm not leaving you to face this alone. I'm not alone. William and Catherine are here, and I have good legal counsel. Besides, cutting short a state visit would send a signal to the world that the monarchy is in crisis. We can't afford that. It went against every instinct Charles had as a husband, but Camilla could hear him recognizing the political wisdom in her words. As king, his first responsibility was to the institution of the monarchy, even when it conflicted with his personal desires. What do you need me to do? Stay in Australia and act like everything is normal. Attend your scheduled events. Give your speeches, smile for the cameras. Let me handle things here. After they hung up, Camilla sat alone in her study as the afternoon light faded outside. She thought about the conversation she would have to have with the Prime Minister in a few hours, the words she would use to defy his demands and insist on her innocence. But first, she had another call to make. She dialed a number she knew by heart, one that connected her to her son Tom. He answered on the second ring, and She could hear the sounds of his busy restaurant in the background. "Mom, this is a surprise. Don't tell me you're trying to book a table at the last minute again." His voice was warm and teasing, completely unaware of the storm that was about to engulf his family. Tom had always been her anchor to the normal world, the reminder that she had been a mother long before she became a queen. "Tom, I need you to listen carefully. There are going to be some very serious allegations made against me in tomorrow's newspapers. They involve money and fraud, and they're completely false." The background noise of the restaurant faded as Tom apparently moved to a quieter location. "What kind of allegations?" Camilla explained as gently as she could, watching her son's world crumble just as hers had that morning. Tom had worked hard to build his own business and reputation, staying as far away from royal controversy as possible. Now he was about to be dragged into the spotlight whether he wanted it or not. "Mom, this is insane. You're the most honest person I know. You've never even taken a pen from a hotel room." "I know, darling. But the evidence might look convincing to people who don't know me. I wanted you to hear it from me first, before the lawyers and investigators start calling. What can I do to help?" It was the same question Catherine had asked, the same offer of unconditional support despite the personal cost. Camilla felt a surge of love for her children and stepchildren, the family she had built through decades of patience and care. "Just be prepared for scrutiny. They're going to look at your business records, your bank accounts, anything that might connect you to royal finances. Make sure your lawyers know what's coming." After she hung up with Tom, Camilla made similar calls to her daughter Laura and to Harry in California. Each conversation was painful in its own way, watching people she loved realize that their lives were about to be turned upside down because of accusations against her. As evening approached, Camilla made her way to the private chapel at Windsor Castle. It was a small, intimate space where the royal family had worshipped for centuries. She knelt in the front pew, not to pray for divine intervention, but to find the strength she would need for the battles ahead. The chapel was silent except for the rain still pattering against the stained glass windows. Camilla thought about all the other royal women who had knelt in this same spot during times of crisis. Queens who had faced war, rebellion, scandal, and personal tragedy. They had endured because they understood that the crown was bigger than any individual who wore it. But they had also endured because they knew when to fight and when to surrender. The question Camilla faced now was whether fighting these allegations would save the monarchy or destroy it. Whether her innocence was enough to overcome the political forces arrayed against her. At exactly 6 o'clock, she returned to her study and placed the call to the Prime Minister's private line. He answered immediately, as if he had been waiting by the phone. "Prime Minister, this is Queen Camilla. You asked for my decision by 6 o'clock. "Yes, Your Majesty. Have you decided to accept our recommendation?" Camilla took one last look at the family photographs on her desk, drawing strength from the faces of the people who believed in her. "No, Prime Minister. I will not step aside. I am innocent of these allegations, and I intend to prove it. I will see you in court." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. When the Prime Minister spoke again, his voice was cold and formal. "I'm sorry to hear that, Your Majesty. We had hoped to resolve this matter quietly. Nothing about this has been quiet, Prime Minister. And if someone is trying to destroy the monarchy through false accusations, then they need to be exposed and held accountable." "Very well. The investigation will proceed as planned. I must advise you that charges are likely to be filed within the next 48 hours. "I understand. I'll be ready." As she hung up the phone, Camilla felt a strange sense of peace. The decision was made, the battle lines were drawn. Whatever happened next, she would face it with dignity and courage, just as generations of royal women had done before her. Outside her window, the rain was still falling on the ancient stones of Windsor Castle. But inside, a queen was preparing for the fight of her life, knowing that the future of the monarchy and her family's legacy hung in the balance. The storm was just beginning, but Camilla Parker Bowles had weathered storms before, and she wasn't about to let this one destroy everything she had worked so hard to build. The morning newspapers arrived at Windsor Castle before dawn, delivered by a nervous young man who had been doing the same job for 3 years but had never faced anything like this. The headline screamed across the front pages in letters so large they could be read from across the room. "Queen accused of charity fraud," and "Royal family financial scandal exposed," and, perhaps most devastating of all, "Has Camilla stolen from sick children?" Margaret brought the papers to Camilla's private breakfast room at 7 o'clock sharp, just as she had every morning for the past 5 years. But Today her hands shook slightly as she set them on the polished mahogany table, and she avoided meeting Camilla's eyes. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty," Margaret whispered. "I know it's all lies." Camilla picked up the first paper and began to read. The stories were even worse than she had imagined. They didn't just report the allegations. They presented them as established facts, complete with anonymous sources claiming to have witnessed her lavish spending and callous disregard for charity donors. There were photographs of her at recent events, carefully chosen to make her look haughty and out of touch. One picture showed her wearing a diamond necklace at a charity gala, with a caption estimating its value at £200,000. The most damaging story was in The Sun, which had somehow obtained copies of bank statements and emails that appeared to show money being transferred from charity accounts to personal ones. The documents looked authentic, complete with official letterheads and what appeared to be Camilla's signature. She stared at her own signature authorizing a transfer of £50,000 from a military charity to an account labeled C. Parker Personal Expenses. "This is impossible," she said aloud, her voice echoing in the empty breakfast room. "I never signed this." But even as she said it, she could see how convincing the evidence would be to someone who didn't know her. The signature looked perfect, the documents bore the correct legal stamps and seals, and the amounts were just large enough to seem significant, but not so large as to be obviously fraudulent. William arrived as she was finishing her review of the coverage, his face grim and his normally perfect appearance slightly disheveled. He had clearly been up all night, probably dealing with calls from palace staff, government officials, and family members around the world. "How bad is it?" she asked, though she could see the answer in his expression. "Bad. The phones haven't stopped ringing since midnight. The Prime Minister's office, the Archbishop, the governments of Canada and Australia, every major news organization in the world. Everyone wants to know what the royal family is going to do about this." William sat down across from her and picked up one of the newspapers, scanning the headlines with the practiced eye of someone who had been dealing with negative press his entire life. "The evidence looks convincing," he admitted. "Whoever created these documents knew exactly what they were doing. But you believe me when I say I didn't do this?" "Of course I believe you. But what I believe doesn't matter. What matters is what the evidence shows. And right now it shows that you authorized transfers of charity money to personal accounts." Camilla pushed the newspapers away from her, unable to look at the headlines anymore. Someone has spent months, maybe years, planning this. They had access to official documents, bank records, even charity files. "This isn't just about destroying me. This is about destroying the monarchy itself." "I think you're right. And I think we need to find out who's behind it before they do even more damage." Before Camilla could respond, Margaret appeared in the doorway again, her face pale with anxiety. "Your Majesty, there are police officers here to see you. They say they have a warrant." The word warrant seemed to echo through the room like a gunshot. Camilla had known this moment was coming, but knowing and experiencing were two very different things. In all her years as part of the royal family, she had never imagined that police would come to arrest her in her own home. "Where are they?" "The blue drawing room, Your Majesty. They're waiting with the castle security." William stood up immediately. "I'll come with you." "No," Camilla said firmly. "You need to stay away from this. If you're seen supporting me publicly right now, it could damage your own position." "I don't care about my position. You're my stepmother, and I'm not going to let you face this alone." The loyalty in his voice reminded Camilla of Charles, and she felt a sudden surge of love for this young man who had become such an important part of her life. When she had first married Charles, William had been polite but distant, clearly unsure about accepting another woman in his father's life. It had taken years to build a real relationship with him, but now he was willing to risk his own reputation to stand by her. "William, listen to me. If this goes badly, you need to be able to take over as regent. The monarchy needs you to be above suspicion. The monarchy needs to stand for justice and integrity. If we abandon family members when they're in trouble, what does that say about us?" It was an argument they could continue for hours, but time was running short. Camilla could hear voices in the corridor outside, official and authoritative tones that meant business. She straightened her shoulders and checked her appearance in the ornate mirror beside the breakfast table. Even if she was about to be arrested, she would face it with dignity. The walk to the blue drawing room felt like a funeral march. Castle staff lined the corridors, most of them trying to look busy while obviously straining to see what was happening. These were people who had worked with Camilla for years, who had seen her dedication to her duties and her genuine care for others. She could see the confusion and disbelief in their faces as they watched their queen being escorted to meet police officers. Detective Chief Inspector Williams was waiting with 3 other officers, all of them wearing formal uniforms that looked strangely out of place in the elegant royal surroundings. He stepped forward as Camilla entered the room, his expression professionally neutral. "Your Majesty, I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to defraud registered charities." The words hung in the air like poison. Camilla had heard them the night before on the phone, but hearing them spoken aloud in an official capacity made them somehow more real and more devastating. "I understand," she said quietly. "Am I to be taken into custody now?" "Under normal circumstances, yes. However, given your position, arrangements have been made for you to surrender yourself at a designated police station this afternoon. You will be formally charged, photographed, and fingerprinted, then released on bail pending trial." Photographed and fingerprinted, like a common criminal. Camilla tried to imagine those images appearing in newspapers around the world, the mug shots of a queen being processed like any other accused felon. "What are the conditions of bail?" "You must surrender your passport and remain within the United Kingdom. You are prohibited from accessing any bank accounts or financial instruments connected to the royal family or any registered charity. And you must report to a designated police station twice weekly until trial." Each condition was another humiliation, another reminder that her status as queen meant nothing in the face of criminal charges. She would be a prisoner in her own country, unable to travel or access the funds she needed to defend herself. William stepped forward, his voice tight with controlled anger. "This is unprecedented. The constitutional implications of arresting a sitting monarch are being addressed by the appropriate authorities," Detective Chief Inspector Williams interrupted. "We are simply executing a valid warrant based on evidence of serious crimes." "Evidence that could easily be fabricated," William shot back. "That's for the courts to determine, Your Highness." The formal politeness of the exchange made it even more surreal. Everyone was following protocol, maintaining the careful dance of respect and authority that governed British institutions, even as those same institutions were tearing each other apart. After the police left, Camilla found herself alone in the blue drawing room with William and Catherine, who had arrived while the officers were explaining the charges. The 3 of them sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of what had just happened settling over them like a heavy blanket. "We need to call an emergency meeting of the Privy Council," William said finally. "If you're unable to perform your duties as monarch, there need to be arrangements for a regency." Camilla nodded, though the idea of stepping aside, even temporarily, felt like admitting defeat. "What about the children?" "We'll tell them you're sick and need to rest for a while," Catherine said. "They don't need to know the details until we understand how this is going to play out." "And Charles? I spoke to him this morning. He's cutting the state visit short and flying back tonight." It was what Camilla had feared. By coming home early, Charles would signal to the world that the monarchy was in crisis. But she also understood that he couldn't stay away while his wife was being arrested. Margaret appeared in the doorway once again, this time carrying a telephone. "Your Majesty, your solicitor is on the line. He says it's urgent." Camilla's legal team had been assembled hastily the night before, led by Sir Michael Thornton, one of London's most experienced criminal defense attorneys. He was known for his discretion and his ability to handle high-profile cases, but even he had never represented a sitting monarch accused of fraud. "Sir Michael," Camilla said as she took the phone, "I assume you've seen the newspapers." "Indeed I have, Your Majesty, and I've also received copies of the evidence that will be presented against you. I'm afraid it's quite extensive, but it's all fabricated. Every document, every signature, every bank record. I believe you, but proving that in court will be extremely challenging. The forged documents are of exceptional quality. It would have taken considerable resources and expertise to create them. Then, we need to find out who had those resources." "Agreed. I've already engaged a team of forensic accountants and document experts. But I must warn you, this investigation will take time, and the trial will likely proceed before we have answers." Time was the one thing Camilla didn't have. Every day the charges remained in place was another day of damage to the monarchy's reputation. Every headline about the criminal queen was another blow to public confidence in the institution. How long before the trial? Probably 6 to 8 months, given the complexity of the case and the court calendar. The prosecution will want to be thoroughly prepared before proceeding against someone of your stature. 6 to 8 months of headlines, speculation, and public doubt. 6 to 8 months of being unable to perform her duties as queen. 6 to 8 months of watching the monarchy, she had tried so hard to serve being destroyed piece by piece. After ending the call with Sir Michael, Camilla walked to the window and looked out at the courtyard where tourists normally gathered to catch a glimpse of the royal family. Today, the usual crowd of visitors had been replaced by television crews and reporters, their cameras and microphones pointed toward the castle like weapons. "They're going to camp out there for months," William observed, joining her at the window. "Let them. I have nothing to hide." But, even as she said it, Camilla knew that public opinion was often decided not by facts but by perceptions. The image of her being arrested, even if conducted with dignity and respect, would be replayed endlessly on television and social media. People would see their queen in handcuffs and assume she was guilty, regardless of what evidence was eventually presented in court. Catherine came to stand with them at the window, her presence a quiet source of support. "There's something we need to discuss," she said carefully. "About the children." Camilla turned away from the window, already knowing what Catherine was going to say. "The school has been receiving calls from reporters. Parents are asking questions. George came home yesterday asking why his friend's parents were talking about his grandmother being a thief." The words hit Camilla like a physical blow. 9-year-old George, who had always been so proud to be part of the royal family, was now hearing his grandmother accused of stealing from charities. How did you explain to a child that sometimes adults lied about each other for reasons that had nothing to do with truth or justice? "What do you want me to do?" I think it might be better if the children didn't visit for a while, just until things settle down." It was a reasonable request, made by a mother trying to protect her children from trauma they were too young to understand. But, to Camilla, it felt like another piece of her world being stripped away. Her grandchildren had been one of the greatest joys of her life as queen, and now even they were being taken from her. "Of course," she said quietly. "I understand." But understanding and accepting were two different things. As Camilla prepared to leave Windsor Castle for the police station, where she would be formally charged, she felt more alone than she had since the early days of her relationship with Charles, when the entire world seemed to be against her. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was facing the same kind of public hostility now that she had faced then, but this time the stakes were much higher. This time, it wasn't just her personal happiness at risk, but the future of the monarchy itself. As her car pulled away from the castle, Camilla caught a glimpse of Charlotte and Louis watching from an upstairs window, their small faces pressed against the glass. They waved at her, not understanding why their grandmother was leaving in the middle of the day or why there were so many cameras following her car. She waved back, forcing a smile for their benefit, even as she wondered if this might be the last time she saw them as their queen grandmother. By the time she returned to Windsor Castle that evening, after being photographed, fingerprinted, and officially charged with fraud, she might be nothing more than an ordinary citizen awaiting trial. The car carrying Queen Camilla toward her appointment with criminal justice moved slowly through the London traffic, followed by a convoy of police vehicles and press cars. Behind them, the ancient walls of Windsor Castle stood as they had for 1,000 years, waiting to see whether the monarchy would survive its latest crisis or crumble under the weight of accusations that might destroy it forever. The police station where Queen Camilla was to surrender herself had been carefully chosen for its back entrance and relatively discreet location, but that didn't stop hundreds of photographers and reporters from surrounding the building like a siege army. The flashing cameras created an almost strobe light effect as her official car pulled through the crowd, each flash capturing what would become one of the most infamous images in royal history, a reigning British monarch arriving to be processed for criminal charges. Detective Chief Inspector Williams met her at the side entrance, flanked by officers who formed a human corridor to shield her from the worst of the media frenzy. Despite the circumstances, they treated her with the formal respect her position demanded, though Camilla could see the awkwardness in their faces as they tried to reconcile arresting someone they had been taught to revere. "Your Majesty," Williams said as they entered the building, "we'll try to complete this process as quickly and discreetly as possible." The police station was a modern building that smelled of disinfectant and floor polish, its harsh fluorescent lights a stark contrast to the warm chandeliers and natural light of the royal residences. Everything about it was designed for efficiency rather than comfort, a reminder that she was now in a world where her titles and status meant nothing. The booking process was surreal in its mundane horror. Camilla stood against a height chart while officers took photographs from multiple angles, the camera flashes harsh and clinical. Her fingers were pressed against electronic scanners to record her fingerprints, the same hands that had signed state documents, and worn coronation gloves now being processed like those of any common criminal. I need you to remove any jewelry for the photographs, the booking officer said apologetically. Camilla looked down at her hands. Besides her wedding ring, she was wearing her mother's simple gold band and a signet ring that had belonged to the late Queen Elizabeth. The thought of removing them felt like stripping away pieces of her identity, but she complied without protest. The formal charging ceremony took place in a small interview room with white walls and a metal table. A court clerk read the charges in a monotone voice that made them sound like a shopping list rather than accusations that could destroy a monarchy. Camilla Elizabeth Parker Bowles, you are charged with fraud by false representation, conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and theft from registered charities. The total amount allegedly stolen is £4.7 million over a period of 3 years. £4.7 million. The number was staggering, far more than Camilla had expected. Whoever had orchestrated this had been extremely thorough in their fabrication, creating a pattern of alleged theft that went back to shortly after her coronation. Do you understand these charges? The clerk continued. I understand them, and I categorically deny them, Camilla replied firmly. Sir Michael Thornton, her solicitor, had been allowed to observe the proceedings from a corner of the room. He stepped forward now to address the charging officer. My client will be pleading not guilty to all charges. We request that bail be set at a reasonable amount, and we object to the restrictions on her movement and financial access. The bail hearing was scheduled for the following morning, which meant Camilla would spend the night in custody unless special arrangements were made. The thought of the Queen of England sleeping in a police cell while awaiting bail was so unprecedented that even the experienced officers seemed unsure how to proceed. Given the unusual circumstances, Detective Chief Inspector Williams said carefully, "We've arranged for Your Majesty to be held in a secure facility that can accommodate your security requirements." It was a polite way of saying they didn't want the embarrassment of a reigning monarch being found dead in police custody, either by suicide or attack from other prisoners. The secure facility turned out to be a private room in a government building normally used for protecting high-value witnesses, but the metal door and barred windows made clear that she was still a prisoner. Charles arrived at the facility just as Camilla was being processed for the night. He had flown through the night from Australia and looked exhausted, his usually perfect appearance disheveled from traveling. Security protocols prevented him from entering the building, but they were allowed a brief meeting in a monitored room. This is insane, he said, taking her hands in his. Completely and utterly insane. I know, but we'll get through it. How can you be so calm? They're treating you like a common criminal. Camilla squeezed his hands, trying to provide comfort even though she was the one facing imprisonment. Because getting angry won't help. We need to focus on proving my innocence and finding out who's really behind this. Charles looked older than she had ever seen him, the weight of his crown suddenly visible in the lines around his eyes. The Privy Council has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow. They want to discuss the possibility of your abdication. And what did you tell them? That my wife is innocent and that she will not be abandoning her duties because of false accusations. It was exactly what Camilla had hoped he would say, but she could see the political pressure he was under. The Privy Council included senior government ministers, church leaders, and constitutional experts who would be thinking about the stability of the monarchy rather than the fate of any individual member. Charles, you need to be prepared for the possibility that I might have to step aside, at least temporarily. If this goes to trial, I can't perform royal duties while fighting criminal charges. I refuse to accept that. You might not have a choice. The monarchy is bigger than both of us. It was a conversation that echoed similar ones throughout royal history, moments when personal loyalty clashed with institutional necessity. Charles was facing the same impossible choice that had confronted monarchs for centuries: protect the person you love or protect the crown you serve. Their meeting was interrupted by Sir Michael Thornton, who had been granted permission to brief his client on the legal strategy they would pursue. He carried a thick folder of documents and wore the grim expression of a lawyer who had reviewed the evidence against his client. Your Majesty, he said, settling into the uncomfortable plastic chair across from her. I've spent the afternoon examining the prosecution's evidence, and I must tell you that it's more sophisticated than I initially realized. What do you mean? The forged documents aren't just convincing, they're perfect. Every signature matches your handwriting exactly. Every letterhead is authentic. Every bank transfer was made through legitimate channels using real account numbers. Camilla felt a chill run down her spine. How is that possible? It would require access to your personal banking information, samples of your handwriting, official royal stationery, and the ability to authorize transfers from multiple financial institutions. This isn't the work of a lone fraudster. This is a conspiracy involving multiple people with high-level access. Charles leaned forward in his chair. Are you saying this goes all the way to the top of government? I'm saying that whoever did this had resources and connections that would be available to very few people. Government ministers, senior civil servants, foreign intelligence services, perhaps even members of the royal household itself. The implication hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Someone with intimate access to the royal family had spent years planning this elaborate frame-up, collecting the information and access they needed to create unshakable evidence of crimes that had never been committed. Who would want to destroy the monarchy badly enough to go this far? Camilla asked. The list is longer than you might think, Sir Michael replied. Republican politicians who want to abolish the monarchy, foreign governments who see Britain's constitutional system as a threat, even criminal organizations who might benefit from the chaos that would follow a royal collapse. Or, Charles said quietly, someone with a personal grudge against our family. They all knew he was thinking about Harry's departure from royal duties and the bitter recriminations that had followed. But neither of them could believe that Harry, despite his anger and hurt, would try to destroy his father and stepmother so comprehensively. There's something else, Sir Michael continued. The timing of these revelations suggests that whoever is behind this has been waiting for the right moment to strike. Your coronation was successful, public approval of the monarchy is relatively high, and there are no major political crises to distract from the scandal. This was calculated for maximum impact. Camilla thought about the months since the coronation, the steady routine of royal duties and public appearances. Had someone been watching and waiting all that time, looking for the perfect moment to destroy everything she had worked to build? What's our defense strategy? We have 3 approaches. First, we'll challenge the authenticity of every piece of evidence, bringing in document experts and forensic analysts to prove the signatures and transfers are forged. Second, we'll investigate the source of the allegations, trying to identify who had the access and motive to create this elaborate fraud. And third, we'll present character evidence showing that you've dedicated your life to charitable causes and would never steal from the organizations you've worked to support. It sounded reasonable in theory, but Camilla could see the challenges they faced. Proving the documents were forged would require time and expensive experts, while the prosecution only needed to show that the evidence looked authentic to a jury. Public opinion was already turning against her, and every day in custody or on bail would reinforce the impression that she was guilty. How long before trial? The prosecution is pushing for an expedited schedule because of the constitutional implications. They want to resolve this before it destabilizes the government. I estimate we'll be in court within 4 months. For months to prepare a defense against charges that had been years in the making. For months to maintain public support for the monarchy while its queen was on trial for fraud. For months to find the real criminals while fighting to stay out of prison. As visiting hours ended and Charles was forced to leave, Camilla found herself alone in the secure room that would be her home for the night. The furniture was basic and institutional, a narrow bed, a small desk, a metal chair that was bolted to the floor. There was a television mounted on the wall, but she didn't turn it on. She knew that every channel would be covering the story of her arrest, analyzing what it meant for the future of the British monarchy. Instead, she sat at the small desk and began writing letters to her family members, trying to explain in her own words what had happened and what she needed from them in the difficult months ahead. The letter to her grandchildren was the hardest to write, knowing they were too young to understand why their grandmother had suddenly disappeared from their lives. As night fell outside the barred windows, Camilla realized that this might be her last night as Queen of England. Tomorrow's bail hearing would determine whether she could continue performing royal duties while awaiting trial, or whether she would be forced to step aside and watch the monarchy face its greatest crisis in centuries. She thought about all the women who had worn the crown before her, facing their own moments of crisis and decision. Queen Elizabeth I defying the Spanish Armada, Queen Victoria mourning Prince Albert while ruling an empire, Queen Elizabeth II navigating the abdication crisis, and World War II. Each had found the strength to endure because they understood that the monarchy was bigger than any individual who served it. But those queens had faced external enemies and clear battles. Camilla was fighting something far more insidious, a perfectly crafted lie that used the truth against her, evidence so convincing that even her supporters might begin to doubt her innocence. Outside her window, London continued its ancient rhythm, millions of people going about their lives while unaware that the thousand-year-old institution of the British monarchy hung in the balance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new revelations, but tonight, in a government safe house that felt more like a prison cell, Queen Camilla prepared to fight for her crown, her family, and her legacy. The battle for the soul of the British monarchy was about to begin, and everything she had worked for during 20 years of royal service would be decided in a courtroom where titles meant nothing, and only the truth could set her free. The courthouse steps were lined with barriers that held back hundreds of protesters, supporters, and curious onlookers as Queen Camilla arrived for what many believed would be her final day as monarch. 4 months of investigation had uncovered a conspiracy so vast and sophisticated that it shocked even the experienced investigators working the case. But it had also revealed the true strength of the woman who had worn the crown with dignity through the darkest period in modern royal history. Sir Michael Thornton walked beside her as they climbed the steps, his confidence a sharp contrast to the uncertain man who had first taken her case. The evidence they had uncovered during their investigation had transformed him from a skeptical defense attorney into a crusader for justice. Behind them followed a team of forensic experts, computer specialists, and investigative journalists who had worked around the clock to unravel the truth. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity, with representatives from governments around the world watching to see how the British legal system would handle the unprecedented trial of a reigning monarch. In the gallery sat members of the royal family, including Charles, William, Catherine, and even Harry, who had flown from California despite the rift that still existed between him and his father. Judge Sir Malcolm Pemberton had been chosen specifically for his experience with complex fraud cases and his reputation for absolute fairness. He was known for running a courtroom where political pressure and public opinion held no sway, where only the evidence mattered. As he took his seat, the room fell silent with an almost electric tension. "This court is now in session," he announced in a voice that carried absolute authority. "Today we will hear closing arguments in the case of the Crown versus Camilla Elizabeth Parker Bowles." The irony of the case name wasn't lost on anyone present. The Crown was literally prosecuting itself, the British state accusing its own monarch of betraying the trust placed in her by the very institution she represented. The prosecution's case had seemed unshakable when it was first presented. For years of meticulous financial records showing systematic theft from 8 different charities, bank transfers authorized with Camilla's signature, and email communications that appeared to show her coordinating the fraud with unknown accomplices. The total amount allegedly stolen had grown to over £6 million, enough to fund entire hospital wings or school programs. But, as Sir Michael rose to present his closing argument, the atmosphere in the courtroom was electric with anticipation. The defense investigation had uncovered something that would send shockwaves through the British establishment and beyond. "Your Honor, members of the jury," Sir Michael began, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of a man who held winning cards. 4 months ago, you were presented with what appeared to be overwhelming evidence of guilt. Bank records, signatures, email communications, witness testimony. It seemed impossible that so much evidence could be fabricated. He walked to the evidence table and picked up a thick folder. But fabricated it was, in the most sophisticated and devastating fraud ever perpetrated against the British crown. What we have discovered is not just that Queen Camilla is innocent of these charges, but that she has been the victim of a conspiracy involving foreign intelligence services, corrupt officials, and technology so advanced that it threatened to fool even our most experienced forensic experts. A murmur ran through the courtroom. During the trial, hints of this larger conspiracy had emerged, but this was the first time the full scope had been revealed publicly. The signatures that you were told were authentic? Created by artificial intelligence software trained on thousands of examples of Her Majesty's handwriting. The bank transfers that appeared to come from her accounts? Made possible by corrupt bank employees who were paid millions of pounds by foreign agents. The witness testimony? Provided by individuals who were either coerced through blackmail or paid substantial sums for their false statements. Sir Michael moved to a large display screen that had been set up in the courtroom. But the most damning evidence of this conspiracy comes from an unexpected source. The screen flickered to life, showing what appeared to be a secure video conference between several individuals whose faces were obscured but whose voices were clear. The audio quality was poor, but the words were unmistakable. Phase 3 is complete. The evidence has been planted, and the arrest will proceed tomorrow. Once the Queen is removed, we can proceed with the final destabilization. And you're certain the documents will pass forensic examination? The AI signatures are perfect. The bank records are authentic because they were created through the actual banking system. Even if they suspect forgery, proving it will take months or years. The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers as the implications became clear. This wasn't just about framing Camilla for fraud. It was part of a larger operation to destabilize the British government. This recording, Sir Michael continued as the room quieted, was captured by British intelligence services during a routine monitoring operation of suspected foreign agents. It took months to decode and authenticate, but it provides irrefutable proof that Queen Camilla was the victim of a sophisticated intelligence operation designed to destroy the British monarchy. Judge Pemberton leaned forward in his chair. Mr. Thornton, are you alleging that this entire case is the result of foreign interference in British institutions? Yes, Your Honor, and we have the evidence to prove it. The next hour transformed the courtroom from a criminal trial into something resembling a spy thriller. Sir Michael presented evidence showing how Russian intelligence services, working with domestic collaborators, had spent 3 years preparing this operation. They had recruited corrupt bank employees, hacked computer systems, and even used sophisticated deepfake technology to create video evidence of meetings that had never taken place. The domestic collaborators were the most shocking revelation. Several members of Parliament, senior civil servants, and even some within the royal household had been compromised through blackmail or bribery. They had provided access to royal protocols, banking information, and official stationery that made the forged evidence possible. The goal was never simply to frame Queen Camilla, Sir Michael explained. It was to create a constitutional crisis that would lead to the abolition of the monarchy and the destabilization of British democracy. By making it appear that the crown itself was corrupt, they hoped to turn public opinion against the entire constitutional system. As the evidence mounted, the prosecution's case collapsed entirely. The lead prosecutor, who had seemed so confident months earlier, sat pale and silent as document after document proved that his star witnesses were paid liars and his physical evidence was the product of state-sponsored forgery. But the most powerful moment came when Camilla herself took the stand for the final time. She had testified earlier in the trial, maintaining her innocence with quiet dignity. Now, with the truth revealed, she spoke not just as a defendant, but as a queen who had been betrayed by those she trusted. For 20 years, she said, her voice steady and clear, I have tried to serve the British people with honor and integrity. When I married into this family, I knew that I would face scrutiny and criticism. I accepted that as part of the price of wearing the crown. But I never imagined that there were those who would go to such lengths to destroy not just me, but the institution I have devoted my life to serving. She looked directly at the jury, 12 ordinary citizens who held the fate of the monarchy in their hands. These charges have cost me months with my grandchildren, damaged relationships I spent decades building, and called into question everything I have worked for. But more than that, they represent an attack on British democracy itself. If foreign powers can fabricate evidence convincing enough to fool our courts and our intelligence services, then none of our institutions are safe. The jury deliberated for only 90 minutes before returning with their verdict. As the foreman stood to announce their decision, the courtroom held its collective breath. On all charges, we find the defendant not guilty. The words seemed to echo through the centuries-old building as the full weight of vindication settled over the room. Camilla closed her eyes for a moment, finally, allowing herself to feel the relief she had held back for months. But even as her legal ordeal ended, the political earthquake was just beginning. The revelation of foreign interference in British institutions triggered the largest counterintelligence investigation in modern history. Within weeks, several MPs had been arrested, senior civil servants had been suspended, and the government had launched a comprehensive review of security protocols. The domestic collaborators who had enabled the conspiracy faced their own trials and prison sentences. Sir Edmund Hartley, the cabinet secretary who had helped orchestrate the initial meeting where Camilla was confronted with the allegations, was revealed to have been receiving payments from Russian intelligence for over 5 years. His arrest and conviction sent shockwaves through Whitehall and led to a complete overhaul of security vetting procedures. The international implications were equally severe. The British government expelled dozens of Russian diplomats and imposed sanctions on the intelligence services that had orchestrated the operation. The revelation that foreign powers had come so close to destroying the British monarchy triggered a NATO investigation into similar operations across Europe. 3 months after her acquittal, Queen Camilla stood once again in the gardens of Windsor Castle, watching her grandchildren play beneath the same oak tree where this story had begun. But everything had changed. The conspiracy had been exposed, the criminals were facing justice, and the monarchy had emerged stronger than ever. Charlotte and Louis ran up to her as she watched them, their faces bright with the happiness that had returned to their lives. The months of separation had been hard on all of them, but the children had adapted with the resilience that only the young possess. "Granny Camilla," Charlotte said, taking her hand, "Daddy says the bad people who told lies about you are going to prison." "That's right, darling. Sometimes people do bad things, but in the end, the truth always comes out. Will they try to hurt us again?" Camilla knelt down to Charlotte's level, looking into eyes that were so much like William's. "There will always be people who want to hurt our family because of who we are. But we're stronger than they are, and we have each other." The bond between grandmother and granddaughter had been tested by months of enforced separation, but it had emerged unbreakable. If anything, the ordeal had brought the family closer together, reminding them of what truly mattered beyond titles and protocol. As evening approached, Camilla walked back toward the castle where Charles was waiting for her in their private sitting room. He looked up from the government briefings he was reading as she entered, his face lighting with the smile that had sustained her through the darkest moments of the trial. "How are you feeling?" he asked, setting aside the papers and making room for her on the sofa beside him. "Grateful," she said simply. "Grateful for family who believed in me. Grateful for a legal system that ultimately found the truth. And grateful that we'll never have to go through anything like this again." Charles took her hand, running his thumb over the simple gold band she had worn throughout the ordeal. "The intelligence services are confident they've identified and neutralized the network that was responsible. The new security protocols should prevent anything like this from happening again. Should. But we both know that determined enemies will always find new ways to attack us. Then we'll face them the same way we faced this, together, with truth and integrity as our weapons." Outside the windows of Windsor Castle, the ancient walls continued their 1,000-year vigil over the British monarchy. They had witnessed conquest and civil war, reformation and revolution, world wars and constitutional crises. Now they had witnessed something new, a reigning monarch facing criminal charges and emerging not just vindicated but strengthened. The conspiracy that had tried to destroy Queen Camilla had instead proved the resilience of British institutions. The legal system had found the truth despite sophisticated deception. The intelligence services had uncovered foreign interference, and the public had ultimately rallied around their monarch when the facts were revealed. But, perhaps most importantly, a family that had been tested by the most severe accusations imaginable had emerged closer and stronger than ever. The bonds between stepmother and stepchildren, between husband and wife, between grandmother and grandchildren, had been forged in the fire of crisis and proven unbreakable. As Camilla prepared for bed that night, she stopped once more at the window overlooking the gardens where her grandchildren played. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new responsibilities, but tonight she could rest in the knowledge that she had faced the worst that enemies of the crown could devise and emerged victorious. The woman who had waited decades to wear the crown had proven herself worthy of it in the most dramatic way possible. Queen Camilla had not just survived an attempt to destroy her. She had emerged as a symbol of integrity, resilience, and the enduring strength of the British monarchy. And, in the morning, she would wake up as she had for months of uncertainty and doubt, as the Queen of England, ready to serve her people with the dignity